Lagos never truly slept. It turned over in its restlessness, dreaming in motion. Its heartbeat was the horn of Danfo buses and the shuffle of tired feet on cracked concrete. Even before the sun peeked through the Harmattan haze, the city was alive, sweating, hustling, hoping. Among its millions was a girl with a blue tray balanced neatly on her head. Her name was Amaka, and she sold bread in traffic. She wasn't special by design. No trending hashtags. No pedigree of wealth or influence. Just skin browned by sun, muscles hardened by the weight of hustle, and eyes that had learned too early how to fight politely with poverty. She moved through the gridlock of Ojuelegba like a blade through cloth, sidestepping okadas and dancing past angry bus conductors. Her bread was soft, warm, wrapped in nylon, comfort for the hurried and the hungry. But what made Amaka unforgettable was her presence. She stood upright, always barefoot, always alert. She didn't beg for a sale. She offered it, like a queen offering a piece of her kingdom. And it was on one of those mornings, sticky with dust and pre-rain heat, that he saw her. He came down from a bus in rumpled clothes and walked past her with a kind of distracted determination. His name was Tund. He had a laptop bag strapped to his back, fraying at the seams, and hope stitched tight into his heart. Tund was a tech intern at a struggling startup in Surulere. He didn't have much. 2 shirts, a borrowed room in his uncle's boys' quarters, a cracked Android phone, and an idea that kept him awake at night: build something useful before Lagos swallowed him whole. He noticed her the first morning only faintly, just a girl selling bread like so many others. But by the 3rd day she had become a fixture in his path, a note in the city's melody. She stood in the same spot every morning, calling out prices with a teasing lilt in her voice. She saw him too. Noticed his consistent timing, the frown of concentration on his face, the way he always rubbed his palms as if trying to ignite something. But they didn't speak. Not yet. That changed on a Thursday. The sky was overcast, the kind of clouds that smelled like thunder. As he approached her usual spot, she caught his eye and tilted her head. "Oga programmer," she said with a sly smile. "You no go use code by bread today?" Tund paused mid-step, surprised. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time he smiled back. "Bread way go run JavaScript inside?" he said. Amaka laughed, and the ice cracked between them. From that morning on it became routine. He'd buy a loaf, sometimes 2, and she would offer a line of tech banter or playful sarcasm. She began calling him Tech Boy. He started calling her CO Bread. The conversations were short, but something real began to grow between them. Some wordless agreement that their days were better because they started with each other. Yet in Lagos, happiness was always on a borrowed time. One morning, Tund came to her spot and found it empty. The blue tray was gone. So was her laughter. He waited a while, even circled the block. Nothing. She didn't return the next day either. Or the day after. The absence hit harder than he expected. He didn't even know her full name. Had no phone number. No way to check on her. At Brixel, the tech startup, he sat in front of his laptop but couldn't focus. He refreshed his inbox and pretended to code, but the only thing he was thinking about was a bread seller with stubborn eyes and a laugh that clung to the memory. What he didn't know was that Amaka was home, fighting a crisis of her own. Her younger brother, Nonso, had come down with a fever. At first it was just shivering, then vomiting. Malaria, but the bad kind. Her mother, who still limped from an old factory injury, couldn't afford to take time off their petty trade. So Amaka used all her savings, money meant for that week's bread supply, on medicine and transport to the local clinic. They stayed indoors for 3 days. No sales. No income. No idea how they would bounce back. At night, Amaka would sit by her brother's bed, the room dimly lit by a borrowed torchlight, and listen to the city outside roar past like an uncaring giant. She didn't cry. She didn't know how. She just stared at the wooden shelf where she kept her empty bread wrappers and waited for the fever to break. On the 4th day, Nonso's temperature dropped. He smiled at her. She kissed his forehead, then pulled her tray from behind the door, dusted it off and left before dawn. She had no stock yet. No bread. Just the weight of routine. Maybe she went out hoping she'd find something. Maybe she just wanted to see if he'd still be there. He was. Tund stood by the kiosk near her usual spot, holding a nylon bag. He looked up and saw her, and a wave of relief washed over his face. "You're back," he said. "I waited." She tried to brush it off. Family emergency. My brother. He nodded. I asked your cousin. She said something like that. Amaka raised an eyebrow. You tracked down my cousin? Tun chuckled. Sort of. She tried to sell me bread. I knew it wasn't you. There was a moment of silence. Then he handed her a plastic bag. She peered inside. A laptop. Scratch. But real. What is this? She asked. Your upgrade package, he replied. You talk about school like it's still calling you. This might help answer. I can't accept this. You already did, he smiled. It's not much, but it's a start. She stared at the machine like it had dropped from heaven. Her tray suddenly felt lighter. Or maybe it was her heart. She didn't say thank you, not because she wasn't grateful, but because the moment didn't need it. She just nodded and walked away slowly, the bag held close to her chest. That night, she sat on a small wooden stool while the laptop buzzed on a rickety table. Power had just come back after 2 days of blackout. The glow from the screen painted her face in pale blue light. She didn't know where to start. So she just opened WordPad and typed her name, Amaka Chinedu. The cursor blinked after her surname, waiting for more. She smiled. She'd teach herself. She had always been a fast learner. Days passed. Every morning she met Tund again. Now they talked about real things, about life, goals, the frustration of living on the edge of something better. Tund would share snippets of his code and try to explain how websites worked. Amaka would bring jokes from the street and stories from the market that made him laugh till his chest hurt. In the evenings she would practice typing. In the mornings they would share bread and bits of their dream. No one had said it out loud, but something deep and strong had started to grow between them. Until Lagos did what it always did. Brixel shut down. The startup couldn't survive the burn rate. Tund's internship was terminated. His little monthly stipend evaporated overnight. He had no choice but to leave the city. His uncle couldn't keep supporting him. He had an offer to freelance remotely in Ibadan, and it was the only option he had left. He came to see Amaka one last time. She saw it in his eyes before he even spoke. You're leaving, she said. He nodded. Just for a while. I need to work. Say, build. Maybe start something real this time. Amaka didn't say much. She just looked down at her hands. He tried to be casual. Maybe I'll send you a job offer when I raise my first $1 million. She tried to smile. If I haven't started my own company by then. They laughed, but it was strained. Before he turned to leave, she reached into her tray and handed him a loaf. No charge, she said. CO bread discount. He took it carefully. Don't forget me, she added softly. I couldn't if I tried, he replied. Then he walked away. That night, Amaka didn't cry. She just opened the laptop and typed faster than ever. Something in her burned now. A kind of clarity. He was chasing something out there. She chased something right here. Not just bread. Something bigger. And maybe, just maybe, Lagos would bring them back together again. The rainy season came late that year. The kind of Lagos rain that seemed angry, pounding rooftops, flooding streets, stopping plans. It could wash away a week's hustle in 10 minutes. But it didn't wash away Amaka's routine. It had been 6 weeks since Tun left. 6 weeks since the boy with tired eyes and bright dreams handed her an old laptop and a promise wrapped in silence. At first, the ache of his absence felt like a weight under her ribs, one she carried without complaint. But eventually she stopped looking toward the kiosk in the mornings. She stopped expecting a laugh, a loaf, a moment. Instead, she looked at her screen. By day she sold bread. By night she typed. Her small room became a dual universe. Half of it was filled with bread wrappers and flour stains. The other half, lit dimly by her borrowed power bank and laptop, was where she learned to live in another world. She taught herself to type. Then basic Excel. Then Google Docs. Then how to open a Gmail account. YouTube became her teacher. Free PDF downloads became her textbooks. And slowly her confidence began to rise. Her younger brother, Nonso, watched her in wonder. Sometimes he'd peek over her shoulder and repeat her words in a whisper. One evening, after finishing his homework, he asked, Amaka, are you going back to school? She looked at him, surprised. I don't know, she said softly, but I think I'm building something. 2 streets from their compound, an old cyber cafe with blinking computers had just reopened under new management. The owner, Mr. Dare, a retired teacher with a limp and a heart for lost youth, noticed Amaka loitering outside one day. She was curious but nervous. He waved her in. "Young lady, you just want to learn or you want to browse Facebook like the rest of them?" She hesitated. "I want to learn more." He studied her. The way she gripped her school bag. The intensity in her gaze. "Come early tomorrow," he said. "I'll show you how to make a spreadsheet." She came. And she never missed a day after that. Meanwhile, in Ibadan, Tun's life was not as neatly unfolding. He was freelancing now, building websites for local businesses, but the clients were slow and cheap. He missed Lagos. Not the noise or the chaos, but the morning energy. The girl with the bread and the boldness. He hadn't messaged her. Didn't even know how. But he kept one photo on his phone. A blurry snapshot he had taken by accident. She was looking away, tray perfectly balanced, her silhouette framed by the sun and street lights. He stared at it often. Every time he got rejected by a client. Every time he stayed up debugging faulty code. Every time he thought about quitting. He remembered her words. "If I haven't started my own company by then." And he kept going. Back in Lagos, Amaka's breakthrough came in the form of a flyer. Pasted on the cafe's notice board. Read, "Digital Skills Boot Camp for Beginners. Free. Sponsored by Niger Code. Application closes in 3 days. Basic computer knowledge required." She stared at it for a full minute. Her heart beat louder than usual. This was it. A door. But could a bread seller walk through? That night, she stayed up drafting her application. It asked for a resume. She didn't have one. So she made one. Googled formats, created a Canva template, typed every single skill she'd learned. She wrote her story in the cover letter. "My name is Amaka. I sell bread. But I am also teaching myself to type, to work Excel, and to learn new ways to earn. I may not have gone to university, but I study harder than most people I know. If you choose me, I will not waste this opportunity." She submitted the form at 11:48 p.m. Then she prayed. Not like her mother prayed, loudly and in tongues, but quietly, holding the laptop like it was a piece of her future. A week passed. No email. No call. Her hope began to slip like sand through her fingers. She told no one, not even Nonso. But on the 9th day, while at the cafe, Mr. Dare called her to his office. "You've been accepted," he said simply. Amaka froze. "They sent the confirmation to the cafe's email. I printed it for you." He handed her a folded paper. Her name, Amaka Chinedu, was written at the top. She almost couldn't breathe. "You're starting next week," he added. "And they're giving you a transport stipend." She whispered, "Thank you." But her mind was racing. She hadn't been in a classroom in 3 years. Could she keep up? Would she belong? Mr. Dare touched her shoulder. "Belonging is a mindset," he said. "You earn your place by showing up. And you? You've already shown up every day." The boot camp was in Yaba. Amaka took 3 buses every morning. Woke up by 4 a.m., finished her bread sales by 6:30, and was in class by 8 o'clock. Her bag always had a loaf, sometimes for breakfast, sometimes as a peace offering to her stomach when it grumbled too loud. She was the only girl without a phone. The only one who didn't know what cloud computing meant on day 1. But by day 7 she was ahead of half the class. Meanwhile, in Ibadan, Tund had just landed a new gig, building an e-commerce backend for a bakery cooperative. It paid modestly, but he noticed something ironic. Every time he uploaded product listings, all he could think of was Amaka. He found himself wondering if she was okay, if she'd continued learning, if she still sold bread, if she had found a way to climb higher. Late one night, curiosity got the better of him. He logged into LinkedIn and searched, Amaka Chinedu. Nothing. Facebook? Nothing reliable. Instagram? Still nothing. He closed the tabs. If the universe wanted, it would cross their paths again. Back in Yaba, Amaka had her first major win. At the end of the boot camp, participants were split into small teams to create basic web projects. Her team chose a simple app to connect local vendors with neighborhood buyers. Fresh food, no middlemen. She led the idea, drafted the user flow, helped design the landing page. Her team didn't laugh when she shared thoughts. They listened. When they presented it on demo day, the crowd clapped hardest for her. She didn't cry. She just smiled like someone who had finally found her feet. Afterward, one of the judges, a woman named Bola who ran a digital startup, approached her. "You have leadership instinct," Bola said. Where did you study? Amaka hesitated. I didn't. Bola blinked. I'm still learning. But I started by selling bread. I just wanted more. Bola smiled. Then let's get you more. I'm offering internships. That night, Amaka walked home under the yellow haze of streetlights, the printout of Bola's card pressed against her chest like scripture. A month later, she wore a simple black gown and stepped into a glass building for the first time in her life. Her desk had a monitor. Her name was on a sticky note. There was air conditioning. Her tray was gone, but not forgotten. At lunchtime, her colleagues ordered shawarma and smoothies. She brought Ajij bread in foil. They laughed not at her, but with her. And soon they started buying from her. Your bread is elite, a beg, one guy said. Where you day get ham? I bake it myself, she replied proudly. That gave her an idea. A crazy one. What if she built something around both her worlds? Bread and code. Hustle and tech. By now, Tund had finished his freelance gig. He had some money saved and had started working on a product idea, a learning app for self-taught coders. But he needed a branding partner, someone with grassroots insight. He scrolled through his old contacts. None clicked. Then, during a webinar about women in tech in Nigeria, a speaker introduced one of her interns who had just transitioned from informal trade into tech. Her name? Amaka Chinedu. Tund nearly dropped his phone. The moderator asked her to share her story briefly. She spoke slowly, clearly, told them how she started, why she kept going, how a stranger once gave her a laptop that changed her life. Tund sat frozen. He had goosebumps. That same night, he found her work email and typed a message. Subject, I still remember Bitcoin bread. The email sat in Amaka's inbox like a ghost from another life. Subject, I still remember Bitcoin bread. From tun.akinyemi@startupmail.com. She stared at it for almost a minute, heart thudding in her chest. There had been many firsts in her new life. Her first paycheck, her first digital design, her first office lunch. But none of them had made her feel like this. Like time had curled back on itself. Like Lagos, in all its chaotic poetry, was reminding her that some threads never truly unravel. She clicked. Hi Amaka. I watched you speak today on the Women in Tech panel. You probably didn't see me in the virtual audience, but the moment I heard you say, I started by selling bread, I knew it had to be you. It's been a long time. I've thought about you often. I'd like to catch up, if you're willing. Not just for old times, but because I think we may be able to build something together. I have an idea, but it needs your eyes, your mind, and your heart. Let me know. Tund. She read it 3 times. The words weren't poetic, but they were full of something stronger, respect, recognition. She replied that evening. Hi Tund. I still remember your cracked laptop and your awkward laugh. It's good to hear from you again. Let's talk. Amaka. They agreed to meet on Saturday at a cafe in Ikeja, not far from where she had once walked barefoot with a tray on her head. Now she wore soft canvas sneakers, a long floral dress, and carried a tablet instead of bread. He was already seated when she arrived, sipping black tea like someone trying to look busy. When he saw her, he stood up, too quickly, knocking over the sugar bowl. She laughed. You're still clumsy, she said, and you're still taller than I remember. She raised a brow. I've always been this tall. They sat, and for a moment, silence wrapped around them. A warm silence. Not awkward, not shy, just full. They talked for 2 hours. He told her about his idea, a mobile platform for teaching practical tech skills to self-taught hustlers across Africa. No fluff, no jargon, just real tools for real lives. He had called it Ground Up, because that's how most people he knew were starting. Amaka listened carefully, asked questions he hadn't considered. She brought up street-level insights, the need for local dialect support, offline modules, and how learning could be tied into micro-incentives like data bonuses. She wasn't just adding color. She was shaping the vision. By the end of the conversation, he said it plainly. I want you to co-found it with me. She blinked. What? I'm serious. I've built code, but you've built people, communities. You see what I don't? I'm tired of doing this alone. She hesitated. I have a job now. I'm not asking you to quit. Not yet. But help me build this. After hours. Weekends. One step at a time. She looked at him, her eyes soft but sharp. Are we building ground up, or rebuilding us? He didn't answer immediately. Maybe both, he said. And so it began. The hours between 7 p.m. and 2 a.m. became sacred. Their calls, their brainstorms, their Google Docs. She would finish work, help Nonso with dinner, then log on to Tun's shared workspace. He would be there, already sketching UI designs or refining algorithms. They were two hustlers again, just in new clothes, with new tools. But some things never changed. He still brought bread to meetings. She still mocked his obsession with clean code. And slowly, the walls they'd built during the silence of separation began to crumble. 3 months in, they had a prototype. GroundUp's first version was simple but promising. It allowed users to register, take micro courses, earn completion points, and request mentorship from local digital volunteers. They launched a pilot among 50 small vendors across Surulere, Okada writers, makeup artists, even a pepper seller who wanted to learn how to advertise on WhatsApp. It worked. People logged in, asked questions, completed tasks. The feedback was raw but excited. Una day teach us how to make money, not just grammar, one user wrote. Tun was over the moon, but Amaka was cautious. If we scale this too fast, we'll crash, she said. We need real funding, real planning. He agreed. And so they began preparing their pitch deck, for grants, for angel investors, for anyone who would listen. At the same time, life outside GroundUp continued. Amaka's boss, Bola, began to notice her exhaustion. One evening, after a long meeting, she called her in. You're doing great work, Bola said. But your fire feels split. Like your heart is elsewhere. Amaka didn't lie. She told her everything. From the bread tray to the boy who became a partner. From the code to the cafe reunion. From the dream called GroundUp. Bola listened without blinking. Then she smiled. I started my first company from a shared room in Unilag. No mattress. Just vision. You don't need my permission to build. But you do need my blessing, and you have it. Amaka was stunned. So, I can? Yes. I'm giving you 3 months off. Build it. And if you need office space for meetings, take the spare room. Things moved faster after that. They rented a co-working space in Yaba. Just a table and 2 chairs. Every weekend, they hosted street sessions, pop-up tech lessons in markets and football fields. Amaka would teach vendors how to register their business on Google Maps. Tund would walk students through mobile UI design. They gave out free bread during breaks. People started calling them the bread tech couple. The name stuck. Even journalists picked it up. One morning, Tund woke to find their app mentioned in a lifestyle blog. GroundUp is the app built by a former bread seller and a street coder, designed for those who don't fit the typical tech mold. And it's catching fire. It went viral. Investors began sending emails. Some were curious, others skeptical. But one, an NGO-funded accelerator in Nairobi, offered them a grant and mentorship program. There was one condition. Both co-founders had to attend the 3-month residency in Kenya. Tun was excited. Amaka paused. Nonso was writing WAC. Her mother's leg had worsened. She had obligations. I can't leave, she said. Tun's face fell. But he didn't argue. That night, she sat in silence by her window. Thought of all the people she'd met, all the girls now learning because she once learned. And she asked herself, what would the old Amaka, the barefoot bread girl, have done? She booked her visa the next morning. In Nairobi, everything changed. They met mentors, funders, educators. They refined GroundUp's model. They rebuilt the UX. And in their small shared apartment, something else shifted. One evening after a long pitch session, Tun sat on the floor and said, you know, when I left Lagos, I thought I was leaving my failure behind. But I think I left something good. She looked at him, said nothing. He continued, I don't want to leave again. Not from this. Not from you. She leaned her head against the wall. I'm not going anywhere either. The final pitch at the accelerator ended with a standing ovation. GroundUp received $50,000 in funding and access to scale in 5 African countries. They returned to Lagos as co-founders, as partners, as something undefined but undeniable. GroundUp hired its first full-time team. Their bread tech learning kits reached 10,000 users. And one morning, just before another team meeting, Tund knelt in their office kitchen, holding a plastic tray with a single loaf of Ajij bread and a small black box resting beside it. He looked up. I know we're not done building, but I want to build forever, with you. Amaka stared at him, heart full, eyes stinging. She took the bread first, then the box. Inside it was a ring. In Lagos, a city where dreams are either buried or born, the sound of possibility began to echo from an unlikely corner. A bakery with mismatched paint and a small sign that read bread tech. People started to talk. They teach children computer things inside a bread shop. Ah, you haven't heard? The girl that used to sell bread in traffic is now on the news. And as the whispers turned into conversations and the conversations into headlines, bread tech grew into more than a business. It became a story, a movement. It began with a video, just 10 minutes long, shot on a borrowed smartphone by one of the teenage boys who learned graphic design in the back room of the bakery. He filmed Ada explaining how they baked bread in the front and coded software in the back. The video wasn't fancy, but it was raw, honest, and deeply moving. By the time the sun had set that same day, the video had crossed 30,000 views on TikTok. A week later, it had reached 1 million. It wasn't just about bread anymore. It was about belief. About what could happen when you give a young girl a laptop instead of a lecture. When you teach a boy from Ajigunal how to code instead of fight. With sudden fame came opportunity. Calls flooded in. One from a news station. One from a women's tech conference in Nairobi. One from a German nonprofit asking how they could fund her expansion. But with opportunity came pressure. And with pressure came the kind of growing pains that no mentor could prepare her for. The bakery, which once smelled of fresh bread and innocence, now buzzed with meetings, laptops, investor calls, and too many expectations. She had staff now. She had legal documents. She had spreadsheets and accountants. And she had him, Michael, now fully back in Lagos by her side as CTO of Bread Tech. Together they had built the foundation. But now, they had to decide what kind of empire they were really trying to build. One evening, the rain fell hard, rattling the zinc roof of their shared office space. Ada stood at the window holding a cup of warm tea. Her eyes were tired. Michael walked in holding his laptop and wearing that familiar look, the one he wore when he was overthinking something. "Investor from Cape Town wants to meet," he said softly. "They're asking if we're open to franchising." Ada didn't turn to look at him. "Franchising? Already? We're barely stabilizing." He sighed. "They said we have momentum. That it's the perfect time to scale." Ada stayed silent. Her thoughts were elsewhere. She had just returned from her third speaking event in 1 week. She had barely seen her mother. The children in the digital room hadn't had proper power all day. "We didn't build Bread Tech to chase momentum," she said quietly. "We built it to change lives." Michael nodded, but his shoulders tensed. This is where stories like this become dangerous. Not because of failure, but because of choices. Because the higher you rise, the easier it is to forget why you started. Ada and Michael weren't enemies. They loved each other in quiet, almost sacred ways. But love, like startups, needs communication, and lately they had run out of time to talk. Michael's father, a respected accountant, had always been skeptical of his son's choices. "You left a proper job to work in a bakery? With a roadside bread seller?" It was the first time Ada had heard herself referred to like that, and it stung. Later that night, she confronted Michael. "Did you defend me?" "I tried," he said. "But he doesn't understand." "You could have helped him understand." He looked away. Every empire is tested, not just by enemies, but by the weight of history, class, culture, and ego. Ada's own family had concerns too. Her mother, who once sold bread beside her, now found herself surrounded by strange men in suits during board meetings. She missed the quiet days, the simplicity. "You're growing," Mama had said one morning while kneading dough. "But don't let the flour blind you. You used to see people. Now you see problems." Ada didn't respond, but the words followed her like a shadow. Even the community began to question her. Some said the classes were no longer free. Some said the kids had to apply through a website. How could their illiterate parents manage that? A few people even spread rumors. "She thinks she's better now. Small fame and she forgot us." This is what happens when the seed grows into a tree. The same hands that once watered it may now throw stones. Not from hatred but from fear. Ada felt it, deeply. And it began to change her. She smiled less. She second-guessed herself more. She buried herself in meetings. She postponed a dinner with Michael. Then another. Then a weekend away. The laughter that once echoed between them faded into silence. Until one night, the light in her finally flickered. She was sitting in her office, alone, surrounded by laptops, receipts, pitch decks, and donation letters. She picked up a framed photo, one from the early days, where Michael and the kids had flour on their faces, coding with bare feet and full hearts. She cried, not because of failure, but because success had taken something from her. At that very moment, a young boy knocked at the bakery gate. It was Musa, the first student she ever taught to type. He was taller now, older, wearing glasses. He walked in and handed her a letter. I just got accepted into a university in Canada. Full scholarship. For software engineering. I came to say thank you. Tears filled her eyes. She stood and hugged him tight. It was the first hug she had initiated in weeks. He looked at her and said, "Bread tech saved me, Auntie. You gave me a future." And just like that, her fire returned. Not because of investors. Not because of newspapers. But because she remembered why she started. Not to build a business, but to build people. The next morning, Ada made decisions. She turned down the franchising offer. She opened a second training room, completely free and paid for by their bakery profits. She rehired her community coordinator. And that night, she cooked dinner for Michael. Not as business partners. Not as co-founders. But as two people who once found hope in each other on the side of a Lagos road. Over jollof rice and plantain they laughed again. Not because everything was perfect, but because they had chosen each other. Again. Michael reached across the table and said softly, "We're doing something impossible, Ada." She smiled. "No," she said. "We're doing something necessary." Closing scene of episode 4. That same week, Bread Tech's story was featured in Forbes Africa. The headline read, "The Bread Seller and the Coder, How a Lagos Pair Are Rewriting the African Dream." The photo below the headline? Not a corporate image, but one of Ada and Michael sitting barefoot with a dozen kids holding loaves of bread and open laptops. Because that's what Bread Tech was. Bread for the belly, code for the mind, love for the heart, and Africa for the world. It began with silence. Not the comfortable silence of two people reading side by side, not the quiet hush of dawn in Lagos before the horns start blaring, but the kind of silence that speaks volumes. The kind of silence that weighs on your shoulders like soaked fabric. Heavy, tiring, fragile. Amara sat in the back of a Kiki Napep, staring out at the traffic she once hawked bread in. Her mind wasn't in Lagos. It was in that tiny bakery in Yaba, in a memory that now felt like a movie she used to love but could no longer watch. She hadn't spoken to Teo in weeks. Not after that investor meeting. Not after the board told her that for Bread Tech to scale, she had to step back and let the professionals handle it. It wasn't what Teo said, it was what he didn't say. He didn't defend her. He didn't stop them. And that cut deeper than any insult. He was the one who once told her that her vision mattered, that her ideas were valid. And now he stood there in a room full of people in suits, silent as they tried to replace her in her own dream. The irony? She didn't even want the company to be global. She just wanted it to make change. To feed and educate not just in Lagos but in Enugu, Sokoto, maybe even the villages her parents came from. What happened to that dream? Teo had become obsessed. Always chasing numbers. Always pushing for expansion. Always on a call. The man who once gave her a used laptop now looked like every other tech bro on a magazine cover. She wanted to believe he hadn't changed. But the evidence was piling up. And yet, she missed him. Elsewhere in Lagos, in a glass-walled office that looked out over the lagoon, Teo stood staring at the same streets Amara had once ruled with her tray of bread. He hadn't slept much. His desk was full of reports and pitch decks, but none of it mattered. Because somewhere along the way he lost her. Not just Amara, the woman, but her energy, her warmth, her fire. She was the soul of Bread Tech, the reason people cared. And he had failed to protect that. He remembered the first time she laughed at his awkward jokes. How she used to pack an extra loaf just for him. How she once told him, "Even if no one believes in you, act like you do. The world will follow." And now the world believed in him, but he had lost the very person who taught him how. The board didn't know that Bread Tech began with sweat and dust and hope on dirty Lagos roads. They didn't see the girl running through rain, shielding loaves of bread with her scarf. They didn't see the heart behind the hustle. But he did. and he had to fix it, even if it cost him the company. Amara was in her tiny apartment when she heard the knock. It was hesitant, almost shy. When she opened the door, he looked different. No suit, no watch, no laptop bag. Just a man standing in the same t-shirt he wore the first day they pitched BreadTech to an investor. Nervous, real, human. She wanted to be angry, but something about his eyes disarmed her. They were tired but honest, full of apology. He spoke first. Amara, I messed up. No corporate speech, no startup jargon, just words. I let them silence you, and I stayed quiet because I thought, maybe if we just made it big enough, we'd finally be safe. From poverty, from doubt, from being overlooked. But I forgot the cost, and the cost was you. She didn't respond right away. The room was filled with 100 unsaid things. Years of friendship, partnership, almost love. But then he did something unexpected. He reached into his bag and pulled out the old laptop. The same one he gave her years ago. Worn out, dented, but still working. I kept it, he said, because every time I think about quitting, I remember who I gave it to, and what she did with it. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't want a tech empire without you, he continued. Let them have their billion-dollar plans. Let's go back to Yaba. Let's rebuild. The way we dreamed it. She whispered, what about the board? I resigned. That was it. That was the moment everything shifted. In the weeks that followed, whispers spread like wildfire. Teo and Amara had walked away from BreadTech's corporate arm and started over. Not as a startup. Not with apps and dashboards and venture capital. But with people. They bought a small space in Surulere and called it Loaves and Laptops. One side sold fresh bread, still made from Amara's mother's recipe. The other side was a tech hub. Free weekend classes for kids, coding boot camps for women, digital skill workshops for market sellers. No investors, no targets, just passion. And it exploded. Their story inspired thousands. Donations came in from Nigerians at home and abroad. Celebrities volunteered. Farmers offered ingredients. Coders offered mentorship. Mothers brought their daughters to see Auntie Amara and asked, how did you do it? She always smiled and said, one loaf at a time. Years passed. Teo and Amara never made a formal announcement, but everyone knew. He still couldn't dance. She still teased him for it. They were partners, in love, in work, in legacy. And one Sunday afternoon, at the very junction where she used to sell bread in traffic, they stood before a small crowd, under a mural of a bread girl handing a laptop to a barefoot boy. They held hands and said, we built this, not because we had the most, but because we gave the most. The crowd cheered. Traffic stopped. And for a moment, Lagos paused for love. And so, the girl with the bread and the boy with the laptop didn't just build a company. They built a story. One that would outlive apps and updates. One that would remind every street hawker, every struggling dreamer, every forgotten girl, that sometimes all it takes to change the world is a little love, a little work, and a lot of heart.